Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nuremberg Forum 2019. On behalf of the entire International Nuremberg Principles Academy, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to welcome you all in this historic room, the room where everything began, the room where one of the pillars of the Nuremberg Principles have been established. The other was in the London Conference establishing the statute. And what mankind had hoped after the Second World War, never again, that has turned to be a hollow dream and has not materialized. On the contrary, we do see armed conflicts more violent than ever. Most recently, hundreds of thousands of people have to flee, thousands of people are killed, and what is missing very often and what is missing far too often is what the Nuremberg Principles demand. And the Nuremberg Principles demand accountability for those who violate international humanitarian and international criminal law. Now, the ICC certainly is a milestone and has been a flagship for the implementation of the Nuremberg Principles. After they have been dormant more than 50 years, only the ad hoc tribunals for Rwanda and Yugoslavia brought them back to life. And the hopes that people had that with the Rome Statute, which is the most massive implementation of the Nuremberg Principles, that would lead to true universality, we see this is not yet the case. However, the principles do not talk about the ICC, do not talk about a particular court. They demand accountability in which way ever. And being mindful that the ICC cannot act in each jurisdiction and in each region, we have to look into alternatives, because the ICC may be disputed, the Nuremberg Principles remain undisputed. And we see so many conflicts, and it's not the substance of the principle to make a judgment whether they are just or unjust or justified or not. That's not the issue. And I would like to quote the late Judge Hans-Peter Kaul, who was among the first generation of judges at the ICC. He put it very simple, and he was right. He said, there is no war without war crimes, full stop. And this is why we need the principles. This is why we need, in those areas where the ICC is not able to act, alternatives. Now, we have many practitioners and scholars among us who have life experience with other mechanisms, and I'm really curious to see and to listen to the debate, what are the alternatives, whatever it takes to implement the principles. Because one thing is clear and one thing that unites us all. What we want to do is we want to give dignity to the victims and we want to uphold the rule of law. Final word from my side is this conference would not have been possible without the hard work of the entire team, not only of the Academy, but also many people behind the scenes, the Court of Appeals and its staff. So I'm most grateful to everyone who contributed behind the scenes to have us all enjoying a wonderful conference. Welcome again and enjoy the conference.
Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome. I address you today as President of the Advisory Council of the Nuremberg Principles Academy. 70 years after the first international criminal trial, which took place here in Courtroom 600 on November 20th, 1945, the Federal Republic of Germany, the Free State of Bavaria, and the city of Nuremberg established the International Nuremberg Principles Academy to promote the Nuremberg Principles. The Nuremberg Principles, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly by Resolution 1/96 on December 9th, 1946, provides the core elements of accountability, that there should be accountability for all international crimes, regardless of factors such as national laws, amnesty provisions, head of state immunities, geopolitics, changes in the international legal order, and changes in the nature of crimes arising from globalization. So it's pretty comprehensive. These principles underpin the Rome Statute. As Carl just said, the Rome Statute, as we know, was established by the international community on July 17, 1998. So although the International Criminal Court, on which I served as a judge on the appeals bench, constitutes the most comprehensive means of ensuring accountability at the international level, it is by no means the sole mechanism for advancing accountability under international criminal law. Firstly, it is practically impossible for the ICC to prosecute all crimes and cover massive atrocities everywhere. And secondly, it is limited by jurisdiction and resources, lack of universal support, and resistance to the court. You know, every time I cross the border into the United States, when I was a judge on the court, then invariably the immigration officers used to say, oh, is that the court that wants to arrest our soldiers? So there is still great resistance from that country and other P5 members to the court. Now, for this reason, the Rome Statute provides for complementarities and prioritizes national prosecutions. It is therefore necessary that other accountability mechanisms and measures complement the work of the ICC to fulfill the objectives of international criminal law. The goal of the Nuremberg Principles Academy is to promote sustainable peace through justice and through observance of the rule of law by supporting worldwide enforcement of international criminal law, furthering knowledge, and building capacities at the international and at the national level to investigate and prosecute the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression, these 4 serious crimes. So for the first time in modern history, in this room where we are now gathered, judicial power, backed by punishment, was exercised by the international community to achieve justice and accountability of individuals for the commission of war crimes and what were called crimes against humanity. The resort to justice as integral to the peace process in the aftermath of great conflicts is a new development and still needs nurturing and direction. The subject of accountability for serious violations of international law was initially embraced in the collective security architecture set out in the Charter of the United Nations, subsequently elaborated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Bill of Rights. Preservation of the right to life and protections against systematic and widespread violations of human rights and human dignity were henceforth to remain cornerstones of the international normative system built after the defeat of Nazi ideology and fascism. And so more significantly, all states were expected to integrate these norms into their domestic legal frameworks and take measures to hold accountable those individuals found to have been in violation. And we're well aware of the critical situation that we are currently going through, where states do not seem to understand that they had undertaken to integrate these international norms of justice, accountability, and international criminal justice. So instead, we have resistance to these norms. So Nuremberg then lay dormant close to 50 years until 1993 and 1994, when the Security Council set up the ad hoc tribunals for former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, on which tribunal I served. And they used Article 7 of the Charter, which is where there is a threat to international peace and security, the Security Council needs to act. So these 2 ad hoc tribunals were followed by other courts set up for Timor-Leste after the conflict there, Sierra Leone, Cambodia, Kosovo, Iraq and Lebanon, and more recently Central African Republic and South Sudan. More recently, the UN General Assembly has established information collecting institutions, namely the Pillay mechanism in respect of Syria and the III mechanism for Iraq. So in addition to these new judicial and alternate mechanisms to ensure justice and accountability, strong and sustained civil society actions led to the development of a robust international institution for the promotion and protection of human rights and for monitoring and reporting violations, such as the Human Rights Council in Geneva and its Universal Periodic Review System and the special procedures. These are the 58 international experts appointed by the UN. So it's clear then that the fundamental frameworks for safeguarding against violations and crimes are in place. These include a strong and growing body of international laws and standards, a vigilant civil society engagement, as well as institutions to interpret the laws, monitor compliance, and apply them to new and emerging human rights challenges. Forums such as these then provide us the opportunity not only for developing strategies for consistent implementation, but also to address gaps in protection. And this is why we're very keen to have the panel address the new draft Convention Against Crimes Against Humanity that's been identified as a gap. Now, while the jurisprudence of the ad hoc tribunals and the International Criminal Court show that significant advances have been made in promoting accountability and delivering justice for victims of serious crimes, there is no doubt that the fight against impunity faces many challenges, from failure to cooperate with the International Criminal Court to the lack of political will to act against impunity. Today's realities compound the challenges. Steeped in ignorance, steeped in fear of justice and accountability, many political leaders are opposed to international criminal justice and are failing to respect the rule of law. President Duterte of Philippines, who has used his military to carry out extrajudicial executions of some 25,000, still counting, suspected drug dealers, has withdrawn from the ICC. So has Burundi pulled out of the ICC after the president assumed power after widespread electoral violations. Other threats come from so-called populist movements, the invoking of nationalism and traditionalism to justify racist, xenophobic, sexist, homophobic, and other forms of blatant discrimination. Hate speech instigating violence is dramatically on the rise, and I've always said when hate speech or racist speech is uttered by political leaders, it is extremely damaging as it influences those who are leaning towards reactionary measures. Democratic institutions are being systematically undermined. Human rights activists warn that repudiation of fundamental rights and the rule of law makes the world more vulnerable to devastating conflicts. So we really should be very concerned about leader after leader almost defying the rule of law and conducting invasions and armed remote drone attacks and so on. The failure by some states to place the collective interest above short-term geopolitical considerations and narrow definitions of national interest have resulted in many failures to take protection, as revealed in the urgent debate on protection of the planet against environmental degradation. That just took place at the UN. In the context of the challenges facing international criminal justice, some of which I have outlined, we look forward to the various panel discussions on alternate measures for accountability, both long-standing and newly emerging. We will look at their strengths and weaknesses and how best they can complement one another. The International Nuremberg Principles Academy stands ready to consider the outcome of your deliberations and of course, audience input, which I encourage. So we will pick up your ideas, your initiatives and strategies expressed at this forum in our ongoing work on the promotion of international justice. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We all know accountability provides a foundation for the future of every society. Without justice, there will be no lasting peace, and reconciliation will remain elusive. I believe I speak for everybody in Courtroom 600 when I say that this commitment to accountability inspires our joint fight against impunity. I'm honored to add my words of welcome to all of you gathered at this year's Nuremberg Forum. Our commitment to accountability is expressed in the Rome Statute and embodied by the International Criminal Court, an institution that symbolizes that the rule of law prevails over injustice. However, institutions of international criminal law have come under pressure. We are witnessing that the acceptance of the International Criminal Court is eroding, which is also a symptom of states increasingly turning their back on the rules-based international order and of the crisis of multilateralism in general. At the same time, we are aware of the difficulties facing the court and of its overall performance. We are working together to respond to criticism where it is justified and to channel it into reforms. At this year's high-level week of the United Nations General Assembly, Federal Foreign Minister Heiko Maas extended an invitation to his colleagues to join him in an alliance against impunity. By forging closer cooperation, he said, we can stand up and respond to the growing public perception of widespread impunity for the most serious international crimes. This joint endeavor is reason for us to look beyond the Rome Statute, and that is what we want to do here in the next 2 days. We should discuss how to best support the international investigative mechanisms that were set up for the crimes committed in armed conflicts in Syria, Iraq, and Myanmar. With these mechanisms that are currently delivering their first results, we are breaking new ground in a challenging environment. These new elements to the international criminal law architecture deserve our special attention. We need to look into ways and means to achieve prosecutions at the domestic level, which is an imperative also in order to make the principle of complementarity work. We need to exchange information on lessons learned in combating impunity through universal jurisdiction. Furthermore, let's work together towards a convention on crimes against humanity. Such a convention would provide a missing element in the codification of international criminal law. This year's General Assembly has the important task of putting the draft prepared by the International Law Commission on the right track towards adoption. I am convinced that this initiative will send out a strong signal of support for international criminal law. Ladies and gentlemen, I should like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks and recognition to the Academy's director, Klaus Rackwitz, and his team for another year of commitment to making this Academy a fixture in the international criminal law field. And with this, I wish you 2 days of inspiring deliberations. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is for the 5th time that the annual conference of the International Nuremberg Principles Academy, the Nuremberg Forum, takes place in Courtroom 600. A warm welcome to you all to this 2-day event. Let me start with a poem. Once we had a country and we thought it fair. Look in the atlas and you'll find it there. We cannot go there now, my dear, we cannot go there now. Dreamed I saw a building with 1,000 floors, 1,000 windows and 1,000 doors. Not one of them was ours, my dear, not one of them was ours. Stood on a great plain in the falling snow, 10,000 soldiers marched to and fro, looking for you and me, my dear, looking for you and me. These lines form part of the poem Refugee Blues and were written by W.H. Auden 80 years ago. 80 years ago, in September 1939, Nazi Germany started its attack on Poland. Also, 80 years ago, the National Socialists began to murder hundreds of thousands of disabled persons. They called these barbaric acts cynically Euthanasie-Programm, which means, translated from ancient Greek, help to die. The inhuman Nazi ideology accepted only Aryan people who were healthy and able to work as members of the so-called Volksgemeinschaft, who did not fulfill these criteria either because he or she was Jewish, disabled, or belonged to the Sinti and Roma, was excluded from society and could not participate anymore in working and business life. These persons were not offered protective shelter by the law system. They could not expect help from the authorities, but had to fear persecution and death instead. 10 years later, on 23rd of May 1949, the Grundgesetz for the Federal Republic of Germany was signed and promulgated during a solemn session of the Parliamentary Council. In Bonn, on 17th of September 1949, the members of the German Bundestag came together for its first time. And for the first time since 1933, after the National Socialists had undermined the democracy and the rule of law with their Ermächtigungsgesetz, a freely elected parliament started its work. In his opening address, the oldest member of the parliament, Paul Löbe, said, "What does German population expect from the work of the Bundestag? That we form a stable government, a healthy economy, a new social order on the basis of secure private life, that we lead our country towards new wealth. By regarding the German reunification as our prime task, we declare at the same time that this German state wants to be, with all goodwill, a sincere member of a unified Europe." In the following years, the Federal Republic of Germany was integrated in the Western alliances, became a trustworthy partner of democratic states, respected the constitutional and human rights, and offered effective protection for minorities. Paul Löbe's wish for the German reunification was also fulfilled 40 years later. 30 years ago, on the 9th of November 1989, after a peaceful revolution, the wall fell. The wall which had been separating the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic and their citizens for 28 years. The reunification of the two German states was within reach. I was then 30 years old and followed the events with great interest. It was my deep conviction that the reunified Germany was on its way to a great future as a democratic and social state, governed by the rule of law, and as an international role model in a strong unified Europe. Generally, my expectations were fulfilled. But today, we also have every reason to be concerned and vigilant. Oh, what is that sound which so thrills the ear, down in the valley drumming, drumming? If W.H. Auden warned us against the scarlet soldiers coming, today we have to be aware of the sounds of words of hatred and violence, and of the sound of the footsteps of individuals whose hatred turns into murder. In Germany, in other European countries, and worldwide, anti-democratic and inhuman attitudes and behavior are gaining ground again. They are directed against ethnic and religious minorities, against homosexuals and persons with disabilities. Authoritarianism and racism become acceptable again. Parties and media of the right-wing extremism agitate against members of the civil society, against church communities and politicians, for example, if these support migrants. The spreading of hate and anti-Semitism, of propaganda and social exclusion is especially promoted by the internet and the social media. I sometimes wish that the movement Fridays for Future would not only demonstrate for a healthy climate, but also for democracy and the rule of law. As law professionals, we bear a special responsibility worldwide. The free democratic order of a state can be undermined and destroyed if we allow social exclusion to happen and do not prevent and fight against inhuman machinations. During this year's conference, you will discuss intensively the Nuremberg Principles, principles of international law recognized in the Charter of the Nuremberg Tribunal and in the judgment of the Tribunal. The concept of responsibility lies at the core of these Nuremberg Principles. Any person who commits an act which constitutes a crime under international law is responsible, therefore, and liable to punishment. The competence for the enforcement of this criminal liability lies in the hands of the International Criminal Court, of ad hoc tribunals, truth commissions, but also of the law authorities of each democratic state governed by the rule of law. The International Nuremberg Principles Academy was established to promote and develop the Nuremberg Principles and international criminal law and to further knowledge about these subjects worldwide. I am glad that this academy exists, and I am grateful for its remarkable work through which it has gained international renown. And I am proud that the Academy has its seat here in Nuremberg. Let me therefore take this opportunity to thank and compliment President Navi Pillay, Director Klaus Rackwitz, and Vice Director Viviane Dittrich, and their staff for their excellent and successful work. The numerous international participants are proof of the Academy's relevance and its outstanding work. I wish the conference every success and especially interesting and stimulating debates. I also wish you a pleasant and eventful stay in the city of Nuremberg. And now, at the end of my speech, I won't quote W.H. Auden, but Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything. That's how the lights get in. Thank you very much.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nuremberg. In my capacity as member of the Nuremberg City Council, I have the honor to welcome you today. I also stand in today for our Lord Mayor, Mr. Ulrich Mali, who is unfortunately not able to be here this morning, but you will see him later on today in the reception in City Hall. In his name and in the name of the whole city of Nuremberg, I want to tell you that we feel very honored to have you here. We appreciate that this internationally recognized conference, the Nuremberg Forum and the conference itself, is being held in Nuremberg. In my opinion, Nuremberg provides the ideal setting for this conference because it's both. On the one hand, Nuremberg is a historic site where the perpetrators of crimes against humanity held their party rallies not far away from here, and where the so-called Nuremberg race laws have been declared by them. On the other hand, you have this very Courtroom 600, which was already mentioned by the speakers before me, the historic site where the first trials took place, where individuals were held accountable for those crimes against humanity. I could read in your program as well that the issue of this accountability and other ways of pursuing this will be major interest to you will be of major interest to you this weekend. I believe both are part of Nuremberg's history, the inconceivable crime and making individuals accountable. That leaves our city and the city council with a difficult legacy. We are aware of the ambivalence of our history. Therefore, the city council decided that it will do everything to only send signs of peace, international understanding, and human rights into the world in the future. This is our obligation. And having this in mind, our city administration has made tremendous efforts to promote human rights and support the rule of law, to grapple with our own history, to deal with the past, and to pave way for greater awareness and effective realization of human rights. Some of the efforts have brought us impressive and worldwide recognized initiatives like the Way of Human Rights or the International Nuremberg Human Rights Award. And only a few weeks ago, our city awarded Rodrigo Mundaca with the International Nuremberg Human Rights Award for his brave fight for free access to water in the Petorca region in Chile. In connection to Nuremberg, a city of human rights, I also want to mention how important the International Nuremberg Principles Academy is. It was created in 2014. The speakers before me already mentioned this. And with its mandate to build upon and carry forward the legacy of these principles created here, it is filling an institutional niche for our city in our attempts to promote human rights and strengthen the rule of law. For me, it's always impressive to see the development of this academy and its international reputation. Last year, I was present for opening remarks of an international conference. And last year, equally as today, I see that many internationally recognized experts of different fields and scholars of international criminal law and way farther of this field followed the invitation. This indicates that the Academy is successful in its ambition to offer a platform for international exchange of ideas in this, I believe, very important field. Therefore, also I want to thank all of you in the name of the Nuremberg City Council for your achievements for international dialogue and international criminal law. And especially, I want to say this I also want to say thank you to the whole team of the Academy, to Mr. Rackwitz, to Mrs. Pillay, and Mrs. Dietrich, but that represents a thank you to all of the team standing behind these achievements in the last years. Finally, I want to come to an end of my short remarks. Last year, at this point, I gave our guest an advice which not only was an advice in international criminal law or the historic part of our city. I told you, don't leave our beautiful city without trying the world-famous bratwurst sausage. I don't want to repeat this advice, but want to add, don't forget the world-famous Franconian beer as well. Thank you very much for your attention.